My name is Jason Gonzales. I'm with the Muskogee Public Library here in Oklahoma. We're on the east side of the state. We're one of 15 libraries that make up our library system. And let me get this. So our project, our Ready to Go project, is multifaceted. We actually have 4 main components to our grant. Number one is the coding club. So we started a coding club in the fall, in October actually. And so the coding club meets every other Tuesday night from 6 to 7:30. We also have a hackathon that's coming up in April that coding club helps to plan. And so the hackathon is the first that we've ever had in our community. And it's actually a mini hackathon because it's just a one-day hackathon, and we're going to get adults. We're partnering with a local technology group. And so anyway, so that part of that coding club is to help plan or get that hackathon going. There's also a Heartland Gaming Expo component. This is a gaming convention, coding gaming convention that takes place every April. It's put on by the University of Tulsa. And so the component that we're actually looking at is that they have a competition. It's very similar to a science fair for coding. So you have 2 categories, basically. You have the category where you have a video game. You set up like a science fair. People come around, play your game, and offer you feedback, and then people vote on their favorite game. And then the other category is where you have the concept for your game. You have the artwork, you have the plot, how the game is going to, all the software specifications. So you don't have maybe an actual game, but you actually have the concept. And again, it looks just like a science fair. You have the multi or the 3-pane board and all of the description, and that's also voted on. So we're trying to include, we're encouraging kids from the coding club to participate in that. And then the final component of our Ready to Code grant was our summer video game camp. So it's a 2-week coding camp that we host here at the library. So that's the overview. I'm just going to run through what each of those looks like. Again, the coding club started in October, and it's going to run through May until the summer coding starts. This was born out of, we've been doing a coding club in the summer, and the kids were saying, you know, you do this is fun for 2 weeks. What do we do the rest of the year? So we would have hit or miss coding events, but they wanted something regularly ongoing. And so that's how Coding Club came about. So again, we do it from Tuesday from 6 to 7:30 every other Tuesday. Also, don't hesitate to break in, and if you have a question, it's probably easier to catch it right now for me than any other time. So with Coding Club, my focus or my goal is to get kids excited or interested about coding, and maybe kids that maybe not have been interested or were aware that they might have an interest in coding. So we also support coders, but really predominantly I'm just trying to get in a recreation format kids excited about coding. So with our format, with our coding club, is that we look at a different coding platform every time we come together. So that's challenging in itself. But so here we have the first time we met, we looked at Scratch. Specifically, we looked at a bullet bill project and we remixed it. So we looked at all the different ways we could remix it. Then the next time we got together, we looked at Game Maker and worked on maze games. So they could make one from scratch, the maze game, or I had preloaded maze games that they could go in and remix, meaning they can go and customize it or add it and see how that worked. Then the next time we got together, we looked at Firefox's X-ray goggles. So I'm very fluid with our coding club. I actually had something planned for that night of the goggles, but I also want the kids to make the club their own. I don't want this to be a classroom setting where I have a strict agenda. So on the X-ray goggle night, I try to encourage the kids to present something at the beginning of club. So at the beginning of that particular session, a kid really likes the Firefox X-ray goggles app. So they gave a 10-minute presentation on it, and then all the other kids spent the rest of the hour and a half using X-ray goggles. So that was fine. We went ahead and just transitioned to that. Another time a kid had read a book called Girls Who Code, and it was a fictional elementary age book, but she had read it over Christmas, was excited to share it with me. So I asked her if she didn't mind to give a book talk on it at club, and she said sure. So she gave a book talk on it. Another kid made their own computer using a Raspberry Pi 3, and they went ahead and presented on that at another one. So again, trying to get the club so that the youth are engaged in it as well. They're a part of the club as much as I am. So we've also looked at another session, Python chatbot. We've done Twine. We've done Little Bits coding kit. And then we just recently did Sonic Pi at our last session. So we're looking at a different one every time we get together. And this is an actual shot of one of our coding sessions. We have we worked up to, started with 3 kids in October, and now we're up to 15 kids that come regularly. So it's growing really well. Of those 15 kids, 8 are females and 7 are males. We have almost an even split. The majority, though, I've kind of been surprised, are 5th graders. Again, our coding club is open to kids 5th through 12th grade, which I thought, we'll see how that works, but predominantly, and we haven't targeted one age per se, but the majority are 5th graders. We do have a 10th grader and an 11th grader that come regularly. And we do have a sprinkling of some 6th, 7th, and 8th, but the majority, I would say, is probably at least half are 5th graders for some reason. All right. Another shot from our coding club. We try to, I'm also, again, want to make this very recreational. So instead of a classroom setting, I make sure to set up all the tables so that they're all able to sit next to each other and share what they're working on and teach one another, again, instead of me just being the sole focus. I still go around and assist with them, but I want to make sure they're kind of sitting in a rounded table. So I put all the tables together in a postage stamp so that so they're all sitting to one another and they're not isolated from one another, because I also want to encourage them to meet other people with similar interests. So, and then we have crazy kids that show up. So it is very much a social draw as well as the coding. So we did have a huge success this last Tuesday, or a week ago Tuesday. We had a state senator drop in, our head of our library, and has been inviting all of our local politicians. So we finally got a state senator showed up, and he took these pictures. So that's State Senator Pemberton on the, of course, the left, in the jacket and tie. So he showed up to our Sonic Pi meeting, and so he just observed for about an hour, and then he ended up making a Facebook post about the wonderful things that were going on here and how the library was a part of that. So that was a huge success story for us. So that's the coding club in a nutshell. The mini hackathon, this is where we are right now. We have an agenda. Again, it's going to be small, see how that works, but we'll start at 10. And again, you can see the agenda there. We'll spend some time hacking from 11 to 4 and doing presentations, but it's going to be open to all ages. And again, we are working with a local adult tech group to help facilitate that as well. But the kids are working on the agenda themselves and making suggestions and recommendations. Then we move into the Heartland Gaming Expo. Again, this is put on by the University of Tulsa. And while it's called a gaming convention, it's really focused on coding. So there's lots of breakout sessions that talk about coding. And so I always encourage the kids to go every year, but we're going to try to be an active participant in the competitions this year. And then finally, our biggest, one of the biggest components of our grant is the Learn, Create, Share video game camp. It's a 2-week camp in the summer. It meets Monday through Friday. They meet for 3 hours every day. We break them up into 2 different groups. So 5th and 6th graders meet in the morning for 3 hours. And then 7th and 8th graders meet for 3 hours in the afternoon every day. And again, we use video game kind of the way to package it around, but we're just trying to get them interested in coding. So that first week, The younger kids use Scratch, so we're showing them the basics of Scratch every day, but we do challenges. So we might say, hey, how do you move the cat from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen? So they'll work through that. And then every day it's some different challenges. And then the last week, they actually are working on making a game. Again, there's a lot more to it. We talk a lot about games because even adults, we don't think about, okay, what makes a game a game? So we have about 30 minutes of discussion. We play different types of video games. So we'll play recreational games. We'll play games that have political agendas. We may play games that have educational component. For example, there's a game where is teaching kids or encouraging kids to take their cancer medicine. So we show that. So I show them different types of games and get them to thinking about what they like to see in games, and so they can incorporate that in their design. So it's not just strictly learning code. Well, that's the biggest part of it. We do again, since we're there for 3 hours, we want to break it up so there's lots of social activity, lots of opportunities for them to discuss, and then a lot of times for them to share with their peers. So here's a session where, again, in coding camp, in this recent one, they're doing a rock, scissors, paper, because we're showing, again, just simply what makes a game a game. So they're running around, they're meeting the people that are going to be in the camp, so they feel more at ease sharing with one another. And then the counselors are also encouraged to get in on it as well. So here's a counselor playing the game with them as well, because they need to be at ease with one another as they are with the counselor. So it's pretty laid back. And then we also allot time for them to play one another's games. So on this screen, he's testing out her game, trying to see how to play. And then we talk a lot about constructive criticism. So getting away from, I hate that game, to, hey, maybe I don't like to use the AWSD controls. I'd rather use the cursor controls, or I'd rather use a mouse to move. And so how do we offer that constructive criticism? So, and then the title of our program, Learn, Create, Share, again, they're going to learn how to make it, they're going to create their projects, and then they're going to share them with one another. And then maybe we do a circular loop and go back to the drawing board, and you can either take the suggestions or, hey, you're satisfied with the way it is. So this is a pulled out shot. So sometimes we'll put their games up on a big screen so the whole group can see. So some of them that volunteer to put it up on the big screen. So she is creating this elaborate maze game. And so that's what that kind of looks like, just to give you an idea. Another example of them playing a game and seeing what they like about the game, what they dislike about, and this is just a commercial-based game. So. And we don't do any kind of competitions. So I don't give awards for best video game or best design or anything, because I want them to feel empowered to try things. So if I give them a competition, they're less likely to take a chance or to experiment with the technique. So then we don't do any kind of competition, so they feel. So in this example, this kid wanted to put himself in the game. So he's like, hey, how can I do that? And so we took a picture, we showed him how to take a picture of himself and then use photo imaging software to cut himself out and then import himself into his Scratch game. So it worked out okay, what he's wanting, but again, it was a learning curve for him, but he decided to test it out, which I don't think he would have, again, if we had done some kind of competition and things like that. That makes sense. We also introduced them to technology. So we have some Oculus Rift goggles here. So we're showing them other types of platforms, because in this, one of our goals is to make them aware of the different types of technology that are available to them. So they get to play with a lot of technology. We set aside time for that. We have a logic model. So this is pretty important to what we do. With this logic model, these are the outcomes. So this is pretty important for our programs, because we want to know, hey, what are our goals for this program? So I have a direction that we're going. So in this example, we have initial, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. The long-term outcomes, yes, they're difficult to measure, but our initial outcomes are very simple to measure. So we wanted kids with our summer coding camp to be responsible users of technology. So we do pre and post testing, so at the beginning of our camp and at the end of our camp, but we make sure that we allot time to talk about responsible use of technology. So every year we try to pick a theme. One year we were picking cyberbullying, but then this past year we were talking about civility. And so for the civility one, we had them do random acts of kindness every day. So every session we'd kick off, I would tell them, okay, you need to give a note to someone tomorrow, or before we meet back together. And then tomorrow we'll have a show of hands to see how many gave them a random act or a note that showed they were appreciative for something. And so we kind of kept track of that through every day in camp. And so, but again, I know that that's one of our initial outcomes is the responsible use. So I tie it back into technology. Then learning how to create media, original media, again, seeing what they can create in coding camp as far as original games and using their own media. Making new friends with shared interests. We also assess how, we ask each of the counselors to assess at the beginning and end of camp where they thought how social kids were, whether they were loners or stuck to themselves, where they were really social, and where they did, show an improvement. And then we combine all of those metrics together to create one final document so that not any one counselor biases the whole camp, if that makes sense. So this is pretty important to what we do. It's also important in that we get challenged from time to time in the camp, maybe with a youth or a particular person. And so I have to go back to these goals and figure out, hey, is their behavior challenging, or hey, are we still accomplishing what we want with these goals? So for example, we had a kid that would not create a game, but was really focused on creating this elaborate film sequence for their game. So they never got to the gummy part. There was a gummy bears and they fell into toxic waste and they were going to take over the city, but he never got to the game. But he created this elaborate opening scene for his game. And that was fine because I want them to learn how to code, and he had to use an immense amount of coding just to get that cut scene to be pulled off. So that was fine. So again, we're not strict in the sense of that. So we also introduced this past summer something called social norms. So we talked to the kids about, hey, what are your rules for camp? So things which blew my mind because they all wanted a talking stick. So they said, hey, we want people to listen to us, but we need a talking stick. And I was like, oh, what is a talking stick? And they're like, okay, so you have a stick and you can only talk if you have the stick. And I was like, okay, so we had to come up with this talking stick that we never would have thought of before. But they come up with about 3 or 4 rules that they want for camp. And that way the group holds each other accountable. And it's not just us as the leaders of the program saying, hey, here are the rules and you need to follow them. We're like, what's reasonable? So we spend time creating a social norm for the group that the kids are a part of, active in creating those norms. That's about it in a nutshell. And it's a lot of time. So there it is. Let me stop this. And okay.